When it comes to peptides, it's this total Wild West situation. The FDA has this list, category 2, not safe substances, and quite a lot of peptides that a lot of us were still using are on that list. BPC 157.
As a provider, according to the FDA, you can get your medications from one of 3 places. The first being an approved manufacturer. The second 2 are compounding pharmacies, 503A and 503B. The medications that are produced within those facilities will never be FDA approved. They're taking materials from an FDA-regulated manufacturer, bringing them in, and then they are regulated at the state level. If it is not one of those 3 sources, and you're a provider with a license, then you're violating FDA law.
All right, friends, welcome back to the podcast. It is I, Nico Misleh, on the Nico Misleh podcast, and I have Courtney Walker here with me today. She's a really good friend of mine and an incredible attorney. And probably some of you guys, if you remember, way back, I did an interview with her on this podcast, which you should totally go check out. Anyways, but she has arguably one of the most, I think, unique and interesting programs out there for especially healthcare providers in kind of the cash-based clinic world and stuff. So whether you're in aesthetics or wellness or whatever, she's just our go-to gal. It's incredible how many questions I get every single day about what are the laws around peptides and hormones and how should we build our consent forms and all these different things, which are super important. And I'm glad people ask them. But I am not a lawyer and I don't know any of that stuff, and nor should I probably ever make comments around that. So in general, I've always needed someone to point them to. And that was really challenging. I mean, for years, I was kind of tossing them over to kind of Joe Schmo lawyers, and not to disparage them, but they just literally didn't know the ins and outs. So anyways, I kind of wanted to introduce you guys again, more or less, to Courtney, and I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit more here. But Courtney, if you would introduce yourself, but can you give us just a little sense of who you are and kind of the backstory of how did Courtney Walker from a little girl end up being adult Courtney Walker, lawyer, and all that kinds of stuff?
Yeah, of course. You said that we did our interview, it was a few months ago, but it also at the same time feels like years ago. So much has changed in the world, and just the world at large, but then also our individual worlds. And we started off crossing over, and now I feel like it's a daily Nico and Courtney crossover. And I hear from clients all the time oh yeah, I heard about you from Nico, and then I'm sending clients your way too. So it's been a fun few months.
That's the best.
So thank you for having me back on, and for also the compliment of it being one of the more unique ways to approach the legal world and private pay healthcare. That's kind of the goal, because my background, of course, is in the law, and recognizing that the legal world at large is a very broken model. And when I started my own company, even as an attorney, getting access to this new area of law for me and exposing myself was incredibly challenging. So it's challenging for me with the law degree and all the resources. What does that mean for normal business owners? Actually, growing up, I did not want to be an attorney. All my family knew that I wanted to be an attorney, but in typical Courtney, big dreamer fashion, I wanted to be a dentist and then be an orthodontist. My orthodontist absolutely changed my life. At one point, I had my gap between my top row of teeth and bottom row of my teeth was so large I could put my finger and my pinky and my thumb in between them.
Wow.
While resting. So orthodontist changed my life. So I wanted to be an orthodontist. I had a whole business plan at the age of 12. Not a lot of friends, but I had a lot of business plans where I wanted to have presidential, and it was going to be shaped like the Oval Office, and shaped like the White House. I mean, truly fully planned out, down to scholarships for people in my little small town community, because I had to actually travel an hour and a half to go to the orthodontist. So it's a huge lift for my family. I get into, of course, go to undergrad, and am in the medical route, shadow a couple of dentists, and I realize you have to have your hands in people's mouths all day long. And not everyone takes really good care of their teeth. And that is disgusting to me. And I realized I was super squeamish. So I called up my parents and said, I think I'm going to change my major. This is like my first year of undergrad. I think I'm going to change my major and I'm going to go to law school. And my dad's response to me was, I'm glad that you finally figured that out for yourself. I mean, growing up on a farm with my dad, I was actually having this conversation yesterday with my brother about interesting and funny stories about what it's like to grow up on a farm in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. So it's a bit of a, life's hard, wear a helmet, cry loud environment because you just have so many things that need to get done on a daily basis. And my brother and I were raised pretty similarly. Like we were each other's playmates. And so I was kind of raised by a diesel mechanic to thrive in a male dominated world. Like the do no harm, take no shit mentality is like just bred into me. Now my mom's on the opposite side. My mom's a first grade school teacher. And so she has people who are grown who still run when they see her out at the grocery store because she's that nurturing, caring, really supportive person. And I think now how that translates into just like my day-to-day job is there's some days where I show up as a first grade school teacher for a second. I've had people cry in their car after drop off line because running a business and managing people is really, really hard. And it's often very lonely and you don't know who you can talk to. And even if you talk to your spouse, maybe they don't fully understand what's going on and how it impacts you emotionally. I work with a lot of women. So how that plays into everything that they do. And then I'd flip over to the, farm girl where it's like, okay, now what's the plan? Because sitting here in this emotion is not going to change anything. So now we've got to get to work. What are we going to do? And even when I am representing someone in front of the board, I think having that interesting upbringing, and my parents were right. Like, I'm glad that I finally realized I wanted to go to law school. But having that interesting upbringing, I think brings a level of like nurturing, but also a level of we're going to get to work and like, I've got your back and we're in this together mentality. But when I first started law school, I would transition from working at the governor's office for a long time. And who knows where the world will lead me. But for a long time, I thought I wanted to run for political office. So I worked for the governor of Tennessee at the time, and then started law school and wanted to be in the world of lobbying and just government. So now full circle, I am in the world of lobbying and government with regulating or influencing regulation, specifically in the med spa world, and working with some big people in the industry of making sure that our state legislators don't overcorrect the industry, which is where we're headed these days, based just on all the things in the news. So it's so funny how I feel like life just dominoes in the way that it's not necessarily like this was the goal. It just was like the next right step. And something that I carry with me throughout my life is I worked for a judge while I was in law school, amazing woman. And she said that there's nothing inherently special about her, which is so false, but that's what she said about herself. Like nothing inherently special about her. She's won all these awards, but all she did was every day she just prepared. So if the door was opened, she was ready to walk through it. So like you might not know what the next door is, but you're working every day in case the door's opened. You're not like, oh, if only I'd been working hard for these past few months, I'd be ready. It's like, no, I'm ready because I know something is going to come up down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I think in a lot of ways, my own life, and I think most people would recognize this, like life feels like a lot of like twists and turns and ups and downs and, crazy stuff. But in a lot of ways, if you do kind of have that, mentality or whatever it is, where it's like, no, like I'm just going to remain open to opportunities and things like that, and new ideas. Like in a lot of ways, it's almost kind of linear. If you look way back, you're like, oh my gosh, like that one thing I did in college, which I thought was super pointless and totally useless, and like I never would, like totally prepared me for this next thing that, again, I would have never seen coming. But I'm so glad I did that one thing. So anyways, like when I zoom way back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was like, of course I would end up as a nurse practitioner, owning my own
Yeah.
business and teaching and all these things. When I was a little kid, like that was never like on the table, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things on the internet about that. Like if you look at a subset of time, like 12 months, the chart will just be like
Mm-hmm.
so far and tight. But then when you zoom out, it's like, oh yeah, it's a lot more linear than
Yeah.
we think. It's just we make, small pivots every single day. Another piece of advice someone gave me when I first started practicing law is you need to be open to the idea of reinventing yourself every 3 years. And this person, and not necessarily totally reinventing yourself, but making some pivot. This person was in the asbestos world. So he was a really great litigator in the world of asbestos, which is not a thing anymore. So if he
Yeah.
was so headstrong on being, I'm going to be the best asbestos attorney forever, well, that's not a thing. But if you take like the skills that you learned while you were honing that, while you were becoming the world's
Mhm.
best for that moment, you can easily transfer that into something else, which as an attorney, I've had like 8 different careers. I've not worked at 8 different
Yeah.
places, but when I first started, I worked in TVA, which is like the quasi-government electrical powerhouse in the South. And so I dealt with the TVA board of directors and a lot of regulations. Then I switched over, started working at a firm and worked in the world of banking. So I represented banks as a creditor in a bankruptcy. I did a lot of education and instructions for banks and their teams on how to be compliant with the regulations. Then switched over and lateral to another firm and was in commercial real estate and development, mergers and acquisitions, was able to learn more in 2 years than people learn in an entire career because that firm was just really incredible. Got a couple of awards for achievements as a young attorney in the mergers and acquisitions world and was exposed to a lot of really insane business. Like at one point, I told this recently to a big group of people. It changed my mentality, especially growing up in a small town. It changed my mentality of money and opportunities for the rest of my life, just being there at that firm and being exposed for a few reasons. One, the numbers were so large. I'm not kidding. I was being the closing attorney on hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions weekly. And
Yep.
that's insane. So just at one point I was like, is this Monopoly money? Like, where are you all getting this
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff? And then I was in the rooms with the people, incredible people, just like being in the room with people from the TVA board of directors, like incredible people. But I also was like, I don't know that you're inherently different than me. I mean, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
that you were necessarily born with some outlandish skill set that I don't have. And also, you're trusting me to manage your transaction, the most, pivotal moment of your business. You're selling your company. You're trusting me to manage it. And I'm 28 years old.
Yeah.
Why are you trusting me to manage it? If I can manage their transaction and get it across the finish line, like I can be in charge of managing the thing then.
Yeah.
I can be trusted to manage and build the thing that you're building. And it just, that moment, that pivot in my career truly changed my idea about business forever.
Yeah. It's weird thinking there in real life, there's money like that just ending up in some dude's bank account. Like
Yeah.
it just happens. It's nothing special. It just like ends up in a bank account and they just move on with their life and go do something else. It's crazy.
Yeah, where you call in and you're like, hey, are you ready to wire $950,000 in cash? They're like, yeah, one
Yeah.
second. Okay, it should be there. I'm like,
Right. Sure. Yeah. No problem. Yeah. In my head, growing up, I always thought that's like a special thing. And like that happens every now and then. Someone gets really lucky. I'm like, that happens like hundreds of times a day. Like there are lawyers transacting that stuff and closing that stuff all day long. It's just what they do. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
It is. It's helpful to know that, right? Because you do meet these people and you're like, yeah, they're 100%. Most of them will tell you, I'm not inherently special. And you think they're full of shit, and they're totally not. They're like, I'm not inherently special. I might just be a little gung ho and a little dumb enough to like think I can make $100 million a year. And they do. And I think it's endearing, really. I think it's like, that's cool. If they can do it, I can, kind of thing. Not like, oh, I'm too dumb or not special enough or something like that.
No,
So,
and I think it just really normalized everything. And then one of the things that I think is a benefit of being an attorney or being in the business world, adjacent to the business world, is I speak to so many people who they're going through a transaction for the very first time. And I've built and sold companies that I personally own. So I've been through it on the personal side too. But my actual experience comes from just being the attorney and being adjacent and seeing the things that people got wrong and that they're having to pay me money to fix before we sell their company. Now it's like, how about you take this lesson that they paid a lot of money for and we fix it on the front end? And so being involved in so many transactions, I've seen the good, bad, and ugly, what worked for people, or HR issues that turned into much bigger issues, and how to really cut that stuff off before it gets started. Just the exposure to good and bad business without it being my personal headache,
Yep, 100%. Yeah. Courtney, why, before we get into some of the meat and potatoes here, why become a lawyer? Like, you're going to be a dentist for a long time. You said, screw that. Why? I mean, I think that is going to be a question I've always had, because everybody that I've worked with, because I've worked with we have a lot of mutual clients, like you said, everybody I've worked with says the same thing that I've said to myself and to my wife, Cheryl, like, I've never met anybody like her. She's really odd for a lawyer, in like the best way possible. She's like really friendly and funny and like cordial and like normal, and like seems like someone that you could just like have a dinner with and have a really good conversation. And I had not run into many attorneys like that. So like, why did you choose to go into law?
Yeah, I think that attorneys make change, even on a small level. They're one of the few people who make change when it comes to the laws of the land. And I also grew up with being from a small town. The way that people spoke about having access to an attorney was as if it was something that people from where I'm from aren't able to have. Like, as if only I could speak to an attorney, my life, my business, my everything would be so much better. So I grew up not knowing a single attorney, but knowing that like this subset of people are different and people want access to them and need access to them for some reason. I remember when I got accepted to law school and realized I got a scholarship and stuff, like my grandparents just bawled. It actually like makes me a little emotional to think about, because they were like, you're going to be one of those people who were not accessible to us growing up. So I always knew that like attorneys they can really change people's lives for the better, be it you're a family law attorney helping someone navigate a really tumultuous divorce, or you're really impacting law at just the small scale all the way to the state government scale, which led to me being in state government. Because, when you go to the court and you litigate a case and the judge makes a decision, that decision is law. It's not a statute, but it's law. And that is the way that our world operates. And so I just knew that it's a really good avenue to help impact a lot of people's lives, hopefully positively. I always knew that too. I wanted to help people like my grandparents, like my parents, who felt like an attorney was just out of reach because there's this like billable hour requirement and so many things that, of course, you need to pay people for their time, but how do you get good legal advice at a reasonable rate without being in the world of no shade, but like without being in like appointed work or working for legal aid, all really great areas. But I'm like, there's these people in the middle who don't qualify for legal aid, who don't qualify for appointed work, but also aren't paying my $25,000 a month retainer at my prior law firm, who are getting lost in the shuffle, and they're paying top dollar for mistake after mistake, and they're getting burned, and they're not being able to create generational wealth because they're spending on the back end. They're not being able to like be proactive about the legal aspects of their company. So that kind of led me to law. And then that's really, I mean, I feel like if I just told you that, you're like, oh, it makes perfect sense why you do what you do now.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, it's funny, like the way you even described that. Growing up myself, like I always felt like, man, if you had a lawyer, you were like really going places. And I always thought of it as like lawyers are the people who understand the game that we're all playing, like the rules to the game, right? Because we're all playing the game, but most of us just live our lives like we don't understand it. We just kind of understand some very basic rules, and we kind of go about things with pay our taxes and hope we don't, jack anything up. But yeah, you get into these really bad situations and you're like, man, it would be so nice if I could rely on someone like a lawyer who would tell me the truth and really help me maximize around this, what could be a really bad, or really, it could be a really great position, or it could be a better position if I knew someone. And so it's funny because it makes me think of my twin brother. We used to play sports, like, obviously on the same teams, we were twins. And we played football, and I was kind of like look, we'll just like crack skulls and I'll get some CTE. But my brother, like, I remember him reading like the rules of the game. And I remember being like, this is like so useful. Like whatever it is you're learning here, like there's out of bounds and there's touchdowns, and that's about all you need to know. But he would make decisions like in real time in the game that would like help us win. like if he had not known this like random crazy rule that even the refs would be like, what? Oh my God, that's crazy. I can't believe he did that. It changed the outcome for the entire team versus like me just being out there, trying to tackle people. So I think of lawyers in the same way. And I think if more people maybe even grasped that understanding of like, look, these people are, as much as like, I think lawyers, not unlike maybe healthcare, like they get a bad rap a lot of times. And we all understand why. But at the end of the day, it's really endearing when you find a lawyer like yourself who steps in and says like, look, I'm coming from a background where I know what it's like to not have one. And I know the privilege and the honor and it is to have one at your side. And so anyways, I thank you for kind of stepping into that role, because it's really special and I think it's really unique.
I don't think this will be surprising to you, but my very first job was not like really a job, but I used to read car manuals, which is a very attorney thing to do. But I would get paid in the parking lot at church to change people's lock codes, like the push button lock codes on the outside of their car, because no one knew how to change it. No one was using it. And I got a rap for like being really good at figuring that out really quickly, because I like to read car manuals. Again, I had a lot of business plans, maybe not the most friends, because I was reading car manuals and developing out of a dental office. But I would people would pay me like $5 to go out and just change their car code to whatever they wanted it to be. So yeah, I think attorneys are all about knowing the rules of the game that you're playing. And of course, playing a game like, Monopoly or anything like any board game analogy, you are going to do substantially better if you are aware of the rules.
100%. Courtney, we're going to pivot a little bit here. You did a podcast with a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Sakamoto, about peptides. And again, if those of you who haven't listened to it, please listen to it, kind of thing. But for my audience in particular, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion and gray area. And I know you know this because you're coming from the world of aesthetics, especially in med spa stuff, where there are a lot of products that probably hit that gray area, and how are you applying it and things like that. And I think for the most part, HRT at this point is pretty clean on that front. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out like, hey, this is widely accepted for the most part now. There are very clear rules and regulations around it. But when it comes to peptides, it's this total Wild West situation. So, the FDA has this like list of like category 2, not safe substances, and quite a lot of peptides that a lot of us were using, probably a lot of us are still using, are on that list. So peptides like BPC 157, CJC, anyways, it's a pretty long list. And practically all the peptides that were like kind of fun and interesting are on there. First of all, I'm not trying to grill you here. Like, do you know much about that? And can you speak to like why these products end up on lists like that?
Yeah. So, not so much like necessarily like the science behind why the FDA puts them on lists like that, but we can talk over the legalities of it.
Yes.
It's not gray. It's not really when it comes down to it. And that's one of the things, like we're talking about monopoly in games. One of the things that I do for people is break down the law and the steps that you would walk through on a legal analysis. So you ultimately end up at clinical decision, because that is the scope of everyone that I work with. That's the scope of their license. So what do we need to walk through on a logic standpoint? Your email today was all about truth tables and logic of, is a peptide a hormone? Like some peptides are, but not all, not all hormones are peptides. So if walking through the logic till you get to clinical decision is not that gray in the legal world. So breaking it down super simple. As a provider, according to the FDA, you can get your medications from one of 3 places, and only one of 3 places. These are for injectable or prescription medications. We're not talking about things that obviously you can go get over the counter. But if it requires a prescription, you can only get them from one of 3 places. The first being a manufacturer, an approved manufacturer. So that is if we're in the world of GLP-1s, the Eli Lilly's, the Novo Nordisk, because Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk have applied with the FDA to get approval for certain uses. They have a patent. The FDA has given them approval. That's the first source, approved manufacturers. The second 2 are compounding pharmacies, 503A and 503B. The purpose of a 503A and a 503B, the medications that are produced within those facilities will never be FDA approved. That's the whole point, because you're taking something that is either been plucked out by a manufacturer and they put a ton of money into it to get FDA approval and to get their patent. You're taking something that is either someone's already done that, or you're introducing something into the world and doing some research on it. You're taking those and you're making them patient specific. So I say that because for a lot of clients I work with, they either have the argument, or they hear their patients have the argument of, if you prescribe something from a 503A or a 503B, well, it's not FDA approved. So It's the same as like a research-based facility. No, ma'am, no, sir. It is not intended to be FDA approved. The pharmacy itself is what gets approval by the FDA. And that's all the FDA approval that needs to happen at the FDA level for that pharmacy to be able to operate. So then we're in 503A and 503B, 3 choices.
If I may, so to clarify on that front, so what you're saying is, from those, especially let's just talk 503A, 503B, those facilities aren't producing FDA approved medications. They are, however, regulated by the FDA. And I think the idea is using materials that are also FDA regulated.
Yes.
Something along those lines, right?
Yeah. So they're taking materials from an FDA regulated manufacturer, bringing them in. The house, the pharmacy has FDA approval to be able to be a compounding pharmacy. And then they are regulated at the state level inside of how they operate. But nothing produced, not a single thing produced in a compounding pharmacy will be FDA approved for, like, have an FDA approval like a manufacturer, because that's the whole point. But the facility itself is FDA approved.
Okay. So where do people get in trouble with if someone could get in trouble, how do they get in trouble with peptides specifically?
So that's why I say it's not really that great. It's not that complicated, and nothing makes me more happy and excited and proud when clients who've worked with me walk through the logic themselves. They're not, this isn't a law school mini course, but you have to be able. There's always going to be something new. Like peptides are going to be old news next year, and there's going to be something else. And you have to be able to, as a business owner, to understand this a little bit. If not, you're going to always be dependent on someone like me. And I have 3 children. The last thing that I want is a nation full of providers who are dependent upon me to be able to operate legally. So where people get in trouble the most is that's the first question I ask is, are you getting it? Are you getting a medication from one of those 3 sources? If it is not one of those 3 sources, and you're a provider with a license and with a responsibility, do not pass go, do not collect $200 because then you're violating FDA law, like wrong, strike 1. And then you're going to be in front of your board explaining why you felt like it was a good idea to prescribe something to someone and give something someone that has a big fat label on it that says not for human use or wherever, whatever source you're getting. So it's like a double whammy. But if you are walking through that like logic, the decisions, if you prescribe something like BPC 157 to someone, you got it from a 503A pharmacy. That is the first thing that we have to check off. Okay, great. It is on a category 2, and it's not, according to the FDA, it's not supposed to be produced at the 503A pharmacy level. My argument to clients is, this is where it gets a little like there'll be 2 sides to the argument. They'll have 2 attorneys representing someone. You got it from a lawful source. They are technically, maybe if I was representing the compounding pharmacy, I would probably have a different answer. But as a provider, did you vet that pharmacy? Did you look at their certifications? Do you understand part of their process? Do you feel confident in what you are getting from that pharmacy, providing that to your patients? The answer should be yes for every single thing that you do. So if you feel confident in that, then you're into clinical decision. This category 2 conversation is really the liability of the pharmacy. Now, you might be in front of your board and you might get an unreasonable board that says like, well, you should have, we don't know because it's not been in front of a board yet. But at least if you feel so compelled that these are life-changing for your patients, that we can get you there and make an argument on your behalf of how you were complying with the law, you were acting within the scope of your license. I tell people, like, I would represent you in that argument. If you're starting off by not getting it from one of those 3 sources, I wouldn't represent you. I wouldn't represent you because it's a losing argument from the beginning.
Right. So, and to clarify what Courtney's talking about, by the way, preface, this is not legal or medical information or education from either of us, I should say. On the outside of the 3 sources, what we're specifically talking about is the research use only. And I've seen some companies, and I think this is, I'll use a strong word, I think it's kind of diabolical what they're doing. But I've seen some companies change to, hey, we'll just take the word research use only and replace it with physician use only.
I was hoping you were going to say that. This is
the
hogwash.
Grossest. It's gross. It's so gross. First of all, physician use only, what does that even, like, literally, could you imagine? So I try to tell providers, it's like, again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know anything. But just imagine you're sitting up in front of a judge, in front of a jury, and you're a nurse practitioner, and now you not only have to defend yourself against a peptide, which no one knows what they are, but you have to defend yourself against where you got it from, which is not one of those 3 sources. You have to defend yourself that it's you're saying it's not research use only, it's physician use only, but you're not a physician. Also, when they say physician use only, what does that mean? Like, what does that imply? It's not coming from a pharmacy. So like, it's just one of those things. And I've heard the other side of the argument, which it would be something along the lines of, and I think you touched on this with Jeff. Oh, well, it's like a supplement. And I'm thinking, okay, so now we have a sterile product, mostly because most of them are injections. Let's be real. We have a what should be a sterile product coming from a sterile facility, coming from a 503A or 503B, ideally, or a big time manufacturer, but it's not. And now we're instructing people how to inject that substance into their bodies, which most of these substances have not had human control trials in any way, shape, or form. Like, again, just think through how in the world does a jury of people like my God-fearing mother and father sitting in front of you, they're going to say this is the stupidest thing you could have ever done. Even if you were trying to do what's right or best for your patient. Again, I'm not disparaging providers, but I think like I think the idea is also that pharmacies and or these companies have you in their best interest. And like these pharmacies, even compounding pharmacies, even though we might feel like we're on the right side of history, they do terrible, horrendous, illegal things all the time, just like many other businesses do. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced that in some way, directly or indirectly, right?
Yeah, they have a monetary incentive to get you to purchase these things, just like sales reps for devices and machines. Like, I'm not saying that they're terrible people, of course, but
Right.
there's a monetary interest in there to be able to get people on board with the change of nomenclature to be physician. It is all just smoke and mirrors. And that's when as a provider, vetting where you are getting your materials from is so important to confirm it is from one of those three sources, whether they say physician only or whatever. Like, great, awesome. Can you show me your license? No. I'm not doing it. And one of the things I touched on with Jeff is I've worked with a lot of clients who are like, but I truly believe in these. Okay, great. Awesome. That's within the scope of your license. I'm not going to claim to know all of the clinical reasons that you believe in it so much that you would put your license on the line for it. But if that is how you believe, then you need to recommend it to people like you would a fish oil supplement. Like,
right.
Tell people that you personally have seen crazy good results with whatever it is. And they might ask you, I mean, I'm thinking of like the supplement lines that you can get at the grocery store. Like, well, there's so many options on Amazon. Like, which one would you pick? And it's like, I've heard a lot of really great success with these three. And leave it at that. If like that, but you can't just you can't just go from sitting across from someone virtually or in person, looking at their labs, telling them everything that they need to know to optimize their health, and be like, all right, now that I'm finished with being your provider, I'm going to take my hat off, and I'm going to not be your provider. I'm going to be a health coach. It's like with the license comes liability, and but there's liability there because there's a responsibility. We have to have our patients' best interests in mind. And the patients are trusting you because you've given them advice thus far, specific advice related to their labs or how they're feeling. And you can't just take your license off.
Yeah, I love the way you're saying this because again, I think you're right. When I hear it coming from you, like it's obviously not a gray area. Like I think it's rather black and white. I think where people feel like it might be a gray area is, I don't want to say like in their ignorance or their lack of knowledge, but a lot of it is that. Like I think a lot of providers are busy. They're business owners like you and I, small business owners, and they've got a lot on their plate. And they just want like a golden star check mark of approval from Courtney Walker saying, yes, prescribe it, knock your socks off, or myself. And there is a point in which, so for example, like, hey, I got a 6-year-old guy, fatigued, losing weight, can't sleep, miserable, blah, blah, blah. His testosterone came back at 200. Should I give him TRT? 100%. Nico, would you give me like a gold stamp of approval? Like, I mean, yeah, I would on that case, but at the end of the day, I'm not that person's provider. Right. So as much as this is the painful part of number one, being in a profession where you're the authority figure, whether you like it or not. And also even as a business owner, you have to just make decisions that are personal to you and that patient or that client. And it might not be the one that Nico Misleh would choose, by the
Yes,
way.
correct. Yeah.
Maybe Nico's a little bit more avant-garde on some of those things. But I think for some of the peptide stuff, especially, I think people are willing to risk way more than they intend to, because there are people out there marketing products that, again, they think it's in good faith, and it's probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on that point, that's why I put so much emphasis, like talking about BPC 157, because I know there are some compounding pharmacies where you can legally, as a provider, get it. That is when it comes down to, okay, we've checked the box legally for, you've got it from a lawful source. Now we're in clinical. And if you don't feel confident, it's one of my favorite parts about what I get to do now is when we get to clinical, I'm like, you're sitting in a room of your peers, which is, let's say 12 to 15 people. Awesome. There's 12 to 15 people on this call. If you can't make your clinical justification, I don't care what it is, you should not be doing it. You don't believe in it that much. You just believe in whatever Nico said, or you believe in whatever you read on a Facebook group. Like, that is when you have to stand up and be able to make your case. And there are people who really, really believe in this stuff, and they have the statistics, they have the studies, they've really done their homework. Okay, that's a good case. That's a good case should something ever come up, because you got it from a lawful source. You really believe in it. But if you stand up in front of a jury of your peers or in front of a board of your peers and be like, why did you do this? Well, Nico told me it was okay. They're going to look around and be like, where's Nico? Who's Nico?
Yeah. 100%.
It's not his license.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think, unfortunately, it makes a lot of people squeamish. Like, oh, then what do I do? Just do nothing. I don't think that's the reality. I think it should be more of like an empowering thing. Like, look, like Courtney and I both are in the business of helping people feel more confident and empowered. Like, at the end of the day, that really is like half of what we do, is just helping people like let's jump through some of these hoops and figure out some of this red tape. And is it there for a reason? And if so, can we realistically make a case around it or not? And we don't have to feel like we, can't get sleep at night because we're thinking about all the like iffy things we've done. But I think at the end of the day, I encourage, and I think you do too, like, you do have to take the time to vet things out, right? Like, if you're going to prescribe a peptide, what peptide is it? What are the studies behind it? Okay, cool. Someone gave you some studies. That's great. Did you go ahead and look at those studies? Are they good studies? Are they on like mice and rats, or is it on human beings?
Yeah.
There's just levels in which you have to take some accountability for, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where communities like the one that, you have can help, because at least then you're saying, okay, I know and trust and stand behind what I've seen from this person over the past 5 months. And so when they say, hey, here's the pharmacy I use, I really like them a lot, you're still required, because you can't cite them as an authority. You're still required to do your own due diligence. But a community of people that you really believe are like-minded and are after the same level of patient care can be really beneficial, because at least now you're narrowing it down, where so-and-so stands behind this pharmacy. Great. Like with scripts, like when they're doing everything right. As a provider, if they're signing up for scripts, you better do your own research, put your own thought and opinion into it. But you're starting off really ahead of just Googling it, because you've got at least people telling you that this is where you should go.
Speaking to amazing communities, arguably you have one of the best I've ever come across. The mutual clients that we share, providers, however we want to call them, have such amazing things to say about it. I think getting into business for first and foremost it's just stressful. I don't care if you're selling shoes. Like, it's very stressful. There's a lot of shit you don't know until it's too late, kind of thing. I've lost a lot of money on that idea alone. Can you describe to people like Courtney, what is it that you do to help, especially providers and small business owners, kind of get to some of the finish lines where they can feel like they can, let their hair down a little bit and relax?
Yeah. So I think what I do is it has a couple of components to it, but it's all to serve a larger purpose of I want providers to not need me unless they really need me. So I said this at the beginning, the legal model that we have right now is really broken. The only real resource that we have for legal care is comparable to an emergency room. And so I named my program the Residency because I had just finished watching, I renamed it recently to the Residency because I just finished watching the series The Pitt. Oh, I don't know if you like medical shows, but I love me a good medical show. And at one point, they had like a mass shooting in the show. And so the ER is wild. People have been waiting forever. A patient's throwing a chair across the emergency room, waiting room. A patient ends up punching the charge nurse in the face because they're so ticked off. That is the world. That is the world of legal world. Everyone is coming to you when there's a 4-car pileup and they need something now. They need it tomorrow. They need you to review this. They need you to draft this. They need it done quickly. And ultimately, everyone is always ticked off. Like, very few people, if you ever see an attorney with a really great review, know that it meant that they did a really, really great job, because you're constantly balancing all these emergencies and triaging just like you do in an emergency room. The problem is you don't often have all the resources to be like, hey, Nico, I told you that we would have this done next week, but I just had a 4-car pileup that is like a real emergency. So I've got to go take care of that. I will get back to you. And so communication, also you're charging for every email you send. So it's super expensive. It just leaves people dealing with solely emergencies, and everyone is coming into it. It's like a losing game, which is, as an attorney, I spoke to a group of attorneys recently, and like, there's another way to practice law where people are crying and telling you how thankful they are for you. I'm like, my husband's also an attorney, and we have very different days. I'm like, three people cried on my community call today, and he's like, I cried 3 times today. So now what I do is I bring groups of people together, because the biggest question I get from people is not really a question. It's, I don't know what questions to ask, which is great because it's so true. If you knew what questions to ask, you'd be really ahead of the game, but I don't get that from a lot of people. So what I bring in is I bring in a group of people. What I've set out is, if you ask me, what do I need to know to be able to operate compliantly in the private pay healthcare space? I have that all set out in pre-recorded modules. I have the documents to support it. And then we meet weekly to go really in depth on specific topics and implement that stuff into your operation. So when you walk in the next day, you don't have to say, am I compliant? It's like, am I operating? Because we baked it in. The other aspect that I do is I meet with each provider at the beginning. It's a 6-month cohort, 6-month journey. Give me what you got for 6 months. And the goal is that you shouldn't need me again unless there is you should need me similar to how we all need an emergency room. Like, I'm here if an emergency happens. Always happy to help. But we're doing preventative legal care for 6 months. So I meet with everyone at the beginning of the cohort, and the question I ask them is, what do you want to get out of it? Because usually they have a couple of big ticket items. Like, I just saw one come through where they are doing an IV hydration part of their business, and they are technically compounding into those IV drips. And so what do they need to know? Like, that's top of mind for them. It's keeping them up at night. So my kind of approach is, if you can tackle not implement everything, but if you can tackle what I've told you is important and I can tackle what you really want to know, come into it wanting to know, at the end of 6 months, you should be really happy. You should have the tools. You have not implemented everything. It's going to be impossible to implement everything. And some of the stuff is not even relevant to you right now. Like maybe you're not ready to hire people and have an independent contractor versus an employee. But when you get there, you have some familiarity. You've been adjacent to people who've had HR issues and they've fired people. You've learned from people's mistakes. You have the tools and resources available. You can always reach out to me. You've got, the recordings available to you, the documents, everything that you'll have when you're there in a year or whatever the timeline is for your business. You are starting off substantially ahead. And you're not making some of those mistakes. Like you're doing what I did and what I benefited from just being an attorney, where you're adjacent to so many people and you're learning from them before you really ever even need to know the information, or you're having exposure to it before you need to know the information. So that's the goal.
I mean, so like the analogy would almost be, again, because I love the way that you've set this up. It's because I never thought of law in this way at all. Like I never thought of it as like a preventative measure. So when I've been in some precarious situations, it's been that emergency room type of effect. And probably that's why lawyers get a bad rap, because it's probably not unlike an ER doc that gets a bad rap a lot of times, right? There's 1,500 people that need you all right at this moment. One person's got a broken arm and he thinks it's the worst day of his life. The other person got shot 5 times and, lost his mother or whatever. So like there's no way you could ever appreciate or understand how much work goes into that, obviously. But what you're saying is almost like, let me give you some preventative stuff. Eat your fruits and vegetables. No, we don't have to start with like cold plunge and sauna. Like, why don't you just like wake up at a reasonable time and go to bed at a reasonable time and try to eat whole foods and go for walks and stuff like that. And if you're ready to start sprinting, fantastic. Like we can look at that too. But like the moral of the story is like, we are going to prevent 90+% of your problems just by doing these things alone. And I can speak from experience, like that is 100% true. Because I did not have a lot of those things in place, and I got burned pretty bad. And again, I think a lot of people just think maybe that's just part of the deal. No, it's usually really something that you could have prevented if you wanted to.
Yeah. So so the normal trial or hiring an attorney for something that really needs to go all the way, the average is $186,000 to $210,000. So a lot of things get settled long before that, but you don't normally get attorney's fees in that. So you could be looking at spending $50,000 to get a settlement where no one really wins.
Right.
But just to keep yourself from getting to that 186,000, like there's a cost benefit analysis, all of that. And I get on the phone so often with people who want to hire me in private practice, and they just don't have the tens of thousands of dollars that it needs to really do a right defense, because nothing moves quickly. I mean, my husband, who is a litigator, has cases that are still active that from when he first started practicing law almost a decade ago.
Wow, that's crazy.
Because you've got depositions, you've got motions for summary judgment. I mean, so you file a motion for summary judgment, which is like stage 10 in a lawsuit. And then that's set for a hearing 3 months from now. And then someone files a response the day before, which then sets it out. And so you've just got time and money and anxiety wound up in these things. So every dollar spent with me, there's no way for me to really put a value on it, but I know from personal experience can save tens of thousands of dollars, because you're just having another comparison. I mean, I'm such a visual learner anyway, and like learn by analogy. I compare it to the game of Minesweeper that you played on your computer growing up, where what we can do is identify the bombs. If you played that game, you like put little red flags around it. So I don't represent a single practice that's 100% compliant, not a one. because a
Yep.
lot of my clients do some version of medical aesthetics, even if it's a light version. And Botox is a single-use vial, and no
Mhm.
one uses it as a single-use vial, not a single practice. Okay, so balm, we've identified it. Now, how do we add the red flags around it? So the people who really care about that balm are the CDC. And the CDC really cares about it a lot in the hospital, and they care about it in private practice too. But infection and disease control is really what we're trying to avoid. It's the real legal reason behind single use versus multi use vial. So, do you have infection and disease control measures in place? Is everyone on your staff following them? If you're like this practice here in Knoxville that had a HIV outbreak because you're reusing needles, that's a bomb and there's nothing I can do for you because you put nothing in place to protect yourself. But even knowing that, it's like, okay, now you make the educated business risk assessment decision. Is that something you feel comfortable with? Knowing full exposure, this is where the bomb is, here's what I need to do to put the flags in. Everyone says yes. Great. Let's move on to the next. So it's really just like identifying, opening people's eyes up. What is your risk? So then you can make really educated risk assessment decisions when you move forward. And some people say no. Some people are like,
Right.
too risky for my blood. And then there are
Right.
other people who go all in. But just going all in
Yeah.
with knowledge is so important.
But you bring up something that's, I think it should be comforting. First of all, like, you can't be perfect. Like, you can't be 100% compliant. There's no business I will just blanket statement. There's no business in the world that is 100% compliant in any industry. It is impossible to do that. And the idea is not to be 100%. The idea is to be as close to that as humanly possible, right? Or at least even give the sense that you're providing the best efforts to do so. Even I remember my dad owned a restaurant like that. The health inspector would come by and like, this refrigerator is not exactly, 37.5 degrees. It's 37.6 degrees. And, again, it was always these little itty bitty things that just needed adjustments or whatever, but it was impossible. Like, these refrigerators are like from the 1960s. Like, there's no way we were going to meet those standards, and we never did. But the goal was, are we making sure that the entirety of the business, as holistically as possible, is as compliant as humanly possible to keep people safe, right? Is that kind of the
Yes.
idea you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, again, I mean, to your point, like, it's impossible. The only businesses that I know that are 100% compliant are the ones that are no longer in business. Like, that's the way to be 100% compliant, is to not be in business. You just can't. And I'm honestly probably to a fault. I don't know if this serves me well or not, but I'm really open about, like, do as I say, not as I do. Like we talked about yesterday in our group, refunds. And one of the things that I say about giving a refund to someone is kind of the end of the call was like, never give a refund to someone without having them sign a waiver. And then I'm also like, I've also had someone sitting in front of me before that I really wanted to go away, and I gave them a refund, and I have the waiver agreement that you have, and I didn't have them sign it. So, it's like, I'm also not a perfect business owner. I'm not a perfect attorney. I'm not perfect at so many things. But so I always say, like, do as I say, not as I do. Because it's just impossible to really do all of the things all of the time. And I think the business owners that I work with, it's not necessarily so much that they want perfection. They just want to know, like, that what's keeping them up at night is not being imperfect. It's not knowing, like, feeling like the shoe is going to drop at any moment. Like someone's going to bust through the door and just take all their stuff and they're going to lose their license. It's just that not knowing that is troubling them the most.
Courtney, if you could leave people, you've been in the world, again, indirectly and very much directly, with business ownership. If you could leave people with a word of advice, or maybe advice that was given to you when you first started out in business, what would that be?
Be really cautious about the illusion of free. I think a lot of times, I mean, I get it. I spoke a lot about my upbringing. If you didn't put two and two together, like I did not grow up with a ton of money. And we would go get 17 magazine when that was a thing and go to the thrift store and like recreate the outfits from the magazine to the best of our abilities. So I'm not trying to be callous about like everyone has bukus of money to spend. But what I found the biggest mistake for business owners sometimes is they come into a partnership or they come into a vendor relationship or they make some decision and the discount is the leading reason they made the choice. Like the fact that it was cheaper is the leading reason. And what oftentimes happens, and I think that you realize that too, and you said it at your conference back in August. What happens is people make decisions and then they are piecemealing things together and they're wasting so much time in the process. If you had just made, like if you had just got the EMR that has the text message capability built in that's HIPAA compliant, you wouldn't be piecemealing your personal text messages into your EMR and copying and pasting them. Like you may have saved $3, but this illusion of free is costing you so much money in the back end. It's a really difficult thing to help people understand that because like you mentioned earlier, what people want is like, okay, tell me what it's worth to spend money on. They want a punch list. You have to make some of those calls for yourself. But I think my caution to people and the biggest piece of advice is your time has a value to it, a significant value. And the bigger your business gets, the more important your time becomes. Do not succumb to this idea that just because it's cheaper, it is saving your business money, because oftentimes it is not in the long run. And that's been my experience.
That's amazing advice. I'll ask this last question because I know I want to be respectful of your time. Did you feel like growing up and getting into business, like was there a moment in time where you felt like that, I don't know, scarcity mentality or like, did that plague you? And if so, like, was there a moment where you like, I remember the day I overcame that, or like I made a shift there, or does it still bother you?
Oh, it still bothers me. I think I just met with someone in the industry who I'm like, I need to learn money management skills in a different way because I'm a mom. And if I don't have my head really around it, but this translates so well. This translates so well to what we've been talking about. And like I told you, I'm probably transparent and open and honest to a fault. I hope that never comes back and people are like, don't use her because she's not perfect. But growing up, like not having a lot of money, I don't have a ton of really good money management skills. I have a lot of like save. But for what reason? Is there a plan? How do we plan for the future? All of that. So I reached out to someone that I work with in the industry. They're an industry leader. And I was like, I'm going to trauma dump on you for a second, if that's okay. And like, I need to learn these skills in a different way, because if I don't learn it and really know how to do it myself, how am I supposed to teach my kids? Like how I'm just going to pass off to them exactly what I know, but like the game of telephone, it's going to be less than what I know. I really want to get a handle on that. So that's honestly one of my goals for next year, is to really get my arms around financial planning in a different way, to combat some of that like scarcity mentality. And when I say that it translates so well is I work with so many people who have teams, who have one or two providers who are leaning on them. And they have the same fear and scarcity mentality, maybe about money, but for sure about the law. And if you don't expose yourself and understand the risks, how are you supposed to lead your team who are also going into the treatment rooms with the same risk? Or they ask questions. Well, I read online that we can't prescribe BPC 157. So why are we doing it? Like, you need to be able to intelligently speak to your staff, to your patients, because they're looking to you as a leader, and knowledge is how you combat and how you build trust, because you're not
Mhm.
saying, well, I listened to a podcast with Nico and Courtney and they told me I could do it. It's like you're able to say that you got this from a reputable source and really back yourself up, your patients, and everyone will instantly trust you.
I love that answer. That's a great answer. Courtney, thank you very, very much for doing this again. Like, it's always so insightful to talk with you. And honestly, even for myself, it puts a lot of my worries at I feel more empowered when I just have these conversations. I think that's what a lot of people get from your cohorts and stuff. It's the ability to just sit in front of someone who is an authority on this matter and vent a little bit and trauma dump a lot, and kumbaya a little bit too. Like that means a lot, because again, look, you can spend $10,000 on a lawyer to give you some advice, and it'll feel kind of hokey, but I think it's money well spent if you can do this with peers and an authority figure like you. I think that is kind of priceless in a lot of ways. And I think you recognize that. And I think people who have been with you recognize that. So will you tell people who are maybe interested in working with you, where can they find you? Like, what are the best avenues to get to you?
Yeah, I think the best way to find me and I can get you to the right place is the place I'm most active on, because I don't like do a blog or anything like that, is Instagram. And it's at It's Court Approved. And from there, I can send you anything that you need on how to work with me or how to work with TRT University, which they're already here. But any person that my biggest thing, kind of talking about ending with the same judge who gave me some advice. One of the things that she said to me that I'm really passionate about, and that's why I tell people just to find me as a person. Like, don't necessarily go find my business, but find me as a person, because if I don't have the answer for you, or I don't know the person, or I'm not the person, I will find you the person. Like, someone I work with just asked me if I could help them with their getting their franchise set up. I'm not the person for that, but I know the person. But one of the things that the judge that I work for said, be willing to, or be ready to walk through the door. But the thing that will make you different is always hold the door open for everyone else who's coming through, because there's room for all of us to be insanely monopoly money successful. And that's what community is all about. So best place to find me is to find me. And if I can't help you, I'll find someone who can.
That's such a good answer. Sherelle, my wife and I, we follow Courtney on Instagram, and we follow her like we follow like Stranger Things, or we're like, what's the next season of Courtney's stories? And it's just funny. It's always funny and insightful and interesting. And anyway, so if you're interested in a really good time, Courtney's Instagram is amazing. Courtney, I will be upset if you don't lead us out with a freaking. Courtney was trying to surprise me, and because I'm addicted to her stories, she has this. I don't even know how to describe it. Can you please just do something? Courtney, that is a app that Courtney downloaded on her freaking iPad to play and attempt to surprise me at some point during our podcast, like a freaking 1980s DJ radio show host. So you'll probably hear that.
I love making people laugh. I love making people laugh.
It's hilarious. I mean, I literally was like, oh my God, I didn't even know that was a thing. So if you thought that was funny, you're going to love Courtney's stories. Courtney, thank you very much. Seriously, so much for joining us. Folks, again, if you're looking to connect with Courtney, Court Approved on Instagram, is that right?
Yep, it's Court Approved.
Yep. Okay. And then we also have a little link on our website, trtuniversity.com. If you're interested, under resources, she's in there too. She's in our Facebook group. So for those of you who aren't in there, she's in there and was really helpful too. That's Nico's TRT University. Again, you can just search that on Facebook. Don't forget, jump in on the daily email. We share a lot about Courtney there as well too, because she's, again, one of our preferred vendors. And we really, really love working with her because she makes such a humongous impact on some of the dearest and nearest people to my business and my heart and soul. So Courtney, again, thank you very much, folks. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.